Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Wendy Dillard here. Today is Tuesday, May the 8th, 2018, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, your second daily dose of happy for the day. And I am pursuing my own happiness in a way that kind of wears me out a little bit, but I did another 10-mile bike ride, and I am feeling it. But I'm feeling it both ways. I feel good. I mean, my muscles feel it, my joints feel it, but I feel good. So I'm taking the I feel good over the other part. What do you say?
Oh, absolutely. As a matter of fact, when my muscles feel sore, that to me, I always read into that my muscles are talking, and I love knowing that my body's giving me feedback.
This is
and
true.
they're just saying, hey, you haven't used us in a while.
Yeah,
Glad
no
that
kidding.
you are, and we're going to strengthen and get prepared to be used more. So keep going.
Oh, and by the way, welcome back. Because
Really?
it's been a while.
Exactly. Yeah. For whatever reason this morning, when I was laying in bed, I was doing some different stretching, and it's like, oh, it pulled, but it felt so good at the same time.
Yep.
Yeah, I love body feedback. I think it's awesome.
It is awesome. I was getting some very specific body feedback during the first part of the ride, because there's one part where there's a pretty stiff uphill run it's not real long. It's, probably a couple hundred yards or something like that, but it feels long enough. And I was in the middle of that, and all of a sudden, my cell phone rings. Now, I'm playing my positive music, so my headphones are plugged in. And so I picked up the cell phone, and I said, hello, and it's Louise asking me about something. She says, where are you? And I'm huffing and puffing as I'm saying, I'm on the hill, the big hill, on my bike. And she's laughing at me. So timing is everything.
Yeah.
But it was good.
I've always heard that if you can talk, even if you're just winded, but you're able to talk, then you're in a good zone.
This is true. Well, I was in a very good zone. I don't know if she understood a word I was saying, but I was in a great zone.
That's great.
And plus, I'm continuing to get good feedback about the book. Got a few more emails from people saying they're loving it, which is great. So, I mean, I'm basically getting reinforcement that what I thought was true is really true. This is going to be a good book. This is a book if you capture the attention of law of attraction coaches, that's what we have, life coaches, who are most of our contributors. If they're liking it, I got to feel that the rest of the public's going to like it too. That's just my opinion, but I suspect that life coaches are going to be harder to please.
Well, and what I think is quite unique about this co-authored book versus the previous co-authored book I did with another group of people and another editor is that when it came to the point you're at right now, I only had my chapter to review. So in other words, I was told, hey, if there's any editing, we'll let you know. But we would only get to see our own chapter.
You didn't get to see the rest of it? Oh, geez. That takes half the fun out of it.
So that was kind of weird, because here I am promoting this book, and I only knew my chapter. I didn't know what anybody else said. So it was quite delightful that you provided the entire book to us. Now, I didn't have time over the weekend to read the entire thing, but, I hit quite a few. I might have hit at least 10 chapters, and I liked what I saw.
Good. Yeah. I don't understand that other thinking, but to me, you have to share the whole book with everybody, especially if you're doing a joint publicity thing. You want to get everybody excited about doing it. How do you expect them to get excited if they don't know what the rest of the book is about? I don't get that.
Well, I'm not going to go into what went down that I was not pleased with on the other one.
Yes,
I'll just
right.
say I'm really pleased with how we're doing it together. You're keeping us informed. We're kind of all in the loop, so we all know what's going on together, and I think that's awesome.
Well, good. Excellent. Yeah, and that's what I was hoping would happen, too, because, excitement, feeling good, that's at the core of the law of attraction. So if we're trying to put a book out without getting into that happy, excited state, we're killing ourselves. Of course we got to get there, and we are, and that's the good news. We're definitely getting there. People are really excited. So I'm excited.
And, well, in this book, because my friend that I talked about the other day, Rhonda, that I had brunch with on Sunday, she and I were talking about the book, and it was interesting because we were spinning energy left, right, and all over, because that's what we do. But we both had an awareness that as much as we have enjoyed both participating in co-authored books, because we've both done books other than the one we're doing with you, we both had a recognition. It's getting close to time for us to be doing our own solo book.
Yeah, why not?
And I've had a lot of people ask me, like, well, Wendy, when are you going to write this stuff down, put it in book form? And I just never really felt like the time was right. And I don't really have that locked in at the moment, but it's definitely kind of playing out there in the radar, like, okay, well, I agreed. Rhonda and I were both like, yeah, something's moving around. So, that's the fun of this co-authored book, is it's helped to spin the energy for what's next.
Well, hey, if doing this book helps to give you the nudge you need in order to do your own book, I figure that alone has made the book worthwhile. So that's a good thing. Seriously, because I'm sure you're going to come up with a really good book when you finally decide to write one. So, yeah, I think the world will benefit.
Thank you.
So how are things going with you? I mean, I've been talking about my stuff, but what's going on in your life? Anything interesting or exciting, or is it just good stuff all the time?
I can't say that there's something specific that I have a huge update on, but I would say this has been a day where I'm aware of law of attraction, playing things out. Things have beautiful synchronicity. I had a dentist appointment today, for the 6-month cleaning. And when I was on a call yesterday with one of my coworkers, we were going to need to talk again today. And I said, well, I'm going to be coming home at 11 from my dentist. And he said, okay, well, do you want to talk again at 11? And I said, let's make it 11:30 just in case it runs over. Now, here's what's ironic. I've been seeing the same dentist for 10 years. I see that every 6 months. I've never had a dentist appointment run over. But somehow yesterday I just felt I should say that. I mean, normally I actually get home from the dentist like where we didn't even use up the whole hour, and they're only about 7 minutes away from me, so I get home really fast. Well, today there was something specific that we were talking about and the dentist wanted to look at, and it's all good. But sure enough, by the time I left and got home, it was 5 minutes right before I had to get on the call with this other guy.
Oh, wow.
And I hadn't even had my breakfast shake, so I had just enough time to blend it up, run to my desk, get on the call. And I thought, see, now that's beautiful synchronicity.
Mm-hmm.
Because even yesterday, the universe knew I needed an extra 30 minutes. And it was only this morning that I even came up with this extra thing I wanted to talk about with my dentist. But I love that our inner being, the universe, sometimes it doesn't matter to me what label I call it, because I think there's lots of different energies and I'm not always sure which one is giving me the guidance, which is why I just throw out a few names. But I love how broader perspective, the universe, has knowledge of all things, even in advance, to orchestrate things so that today I wasn't in a precarious place, because had I made the call to be at 11 o'clock, I didn't have any of his contact information because he's actually in Mexico and he's a new hire, and I'm helping to train him. And it's like, I wouldn't have had any way to even connect with them to let him know that I couldn't make it. And I would have looked like I was blowing him off, which would never be who I am. So I just love that. That to me is just another wonderful piece of synchronicity that I so appreciate about staying tapped in and tuned in to my guys, not my guys with a D.
Your guys.
Yeah, oh, my guys.
Well, I understand what you mean, because the fact is I get really blown away sometimes looking at how the synchronicities like that work. Not so much how they work, but the chronological order that they happen in. And like you said, I mean, my inner being, or your inner being in this case, had to know in advance to kind of warn you this was going to happen. And you look back and you say, how on earth did it know that? I mean, that's just...
Well, and I even had it on the docket that when I was running out to the dentist, I'm like, I need to mail my Mother's Day card to my mom, and I needed to go to the bank and pick up cash for something's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I got this hit, like, do it before you go to the dentist.
Wow.
Or normally I would have done it afterwards. And I thought, well, I don't know, can I fit all that in? I still only had a limited amount of time, and sure enough, it's like I still got to the dentist's office in time to sit in the lobby for at least 5-7 minutes. I was like, I love this just like, it's not even split-second timing. It's like comfortable timing. And I just love that.
It's comfortable and it's very precise. Everything just works in just the way it should. Like we used yesterday, the analogy of the jigsaw puzzle. Every piece fitting in where it needs to go. Amazing. Mm-hmm. Just amazing.
It is amazing. Totally. So I'm kind of geared up for looking at more of our book, The Law of Attraction, today.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to see where it takes us.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we are in part 3. The Science of Deliberate Creation is the name of this part, and we're on a subsection entitled, Am I Too Specific in My Desires? This is a Jerry and Abraham conversation. So Jerry says, let's say that I'd like to be a teacher in a very joyous situation. Would it be any advantage to say, well, then I should decide whether I want to teach history, math, or philosophy, or whether I want to teach high school or something else?
And Abraham replied by saying, as you think about the reason that you want to be a teacher, such as I want to uplift others to the joy that I have discovered in this specific knowledge, your positive emotion indicates that your thought is helping your creation. But then if you were to think, but I'm not well versed in this subject, or there is no freedom for students in this current school system, or I remember how stifled I felt as a student, or I had never had a teacher I liked. These thoughts do not feel good, and the specifics of these are hindering your joyful creation. The question is not whether or not you should be specific or general. The question is about the direction of the thought. What you are reaching for are good feeling thoughts. So reach for good feeling thoughts and realize that you will always find them faster as you stay general in your approach. And then from that good feeling, from that place of feeling good, continue to gently add more and more good feeling specifics to them until you can easily be specific and feel good at the same time. This is the best way to create.
And you know, when they said the question is about the direction of your thought, I was thinking, thought has direction? Really? I didn't know that. But now I understand what they're talking about, because they're talking about the emotional direction of the thought. Is it emotionally good feeling, or is it emotionally not good feeling? And that does make a difference. It makes sense. I just never thought of that as a direction, but that's okay. So Jerry says, would we be better off to just envision the essence of the end result and let the specific details take care of themselves completely?
And Abraham says, that is a good way of going about it. Fast forward to the happy end results that you are seeking. Imagine already having achieved whatever it is that you desire. And from that place of feeling good, you will attract the specific thought, people, circumstances, and events to bring all of that about.
Jerry says, then how detailed would you recommend our thoughts be about the end result of what we want?
And Abraham says, be as detailed in your thoughts about your desire as you can be and still feel good.
Yeah, that's the rule that I try to follow. As long as it feels good, detail is great. It can be detail, it can be deadlines, it could be anything. It's just a question of, does it feel good?
And, you know, I'll jump in here and say that if you haven't yet learned how to really pay attention to how you feel, then this advice kind of doesn't matter, or it's not going to be really advantageous to you, because this is all about, can you feel what you feel? And I've had many a client that I'd say, how do you feel? And they go on a rampage of all sorts of words, and I'm like, not once did I hear a feeling or an emotional word.
Isn't that funny?
Because they'll say, well, I feel like if so-and-so would do such and such, yes, then that would be, like a better scenario. And I'm like, but how do you feel now? Well, I really feel that I wish they would do this. Like, so how are you feeling? And oftentimes, and I think this is very common for people who have not yet learned how to connect with their own body, with their own thinking, with their own feelings. And so I'll just say, give me a word like sad, mad, glad, something emotional based. And it's really funny, well, because sometimes they'll go, yeah, so I know it would be so much better if my mother would just X, Y, Z. And I'm like, oh my God, how are they completely missing where I'm saying, feeling words, sad, glad, mad. Give me one of those.
We live in a very rational and logical society, and most of the dialogue that takes place in society, whether in the business workplace, in the school, wherever, is logically, rationally directed. And because of that, you're right. We don't really have a whole lot of practice when it comes to putting emotional adjectives and verbs and so forth in the context of what we're talking about. We just don't know how to do that. I certainly had trouble with it. In fact, there was the longest time before I even realized how to do it. It took me a while to recognize that if I really focused on something for a moment, I could actually detect in a very, very small way a little tiny bit of feeling. That was how I first started to connect to it. And even now, a lot of the time, most of the thoughts that I have to really work on to say, okay, so how does that feel? But it does get easier over time. And that's the real beauty of it. The more that we practice it, the more we do get better at connecting to the emotional side of the thought.
When I have found that oftentimes those that I have worked with, or just even friends when I ask them feeling questions, are so caught up in the story that they tell. And so caught up in the story of what they want things to be or how they think it should be or how somebody outside of them needs to change. They're really not in their own body. They're not really paying attention to what's going on with them. They're not really being present because they're futurizing the changes that they want to see.
Right.
And it's interesting because something that I don't, how do I language this? Because I don't necessarily believe in lessons. Not that there aren't things that we learn, but I don't believe that spirit ever does things to us or sets us up in precarious situations because there's something we need to learn. But I will say that where I'm at right now, kind of in my own personal development, I continually hear my inner being saying to me, it's none of your business. It's none of your business. None of your business. And that's a phrase that I've heard Abraham say, and I really didn't necessarily know how to incorporate that. I understood when they talked about things that if you stay in your own lane, I love that phrase, stay in your own lane, pay attention to what you're thinking and what you're feeling and what you're creating or not creating, and don't worry about what anybody else is creating, or don't worry about what you think their actions are going to do for them. And Abraham will say, it's none of your business, just stay in your lane. And even right before the show started, I was thinking about somebody and it's like, oh, they haven't done such and such yet. And I heard, it's none of your business. And I went, oh yeah, I forgot. It's none of my business. Now, it's not like my inner being is being cruel to me.
No.
But it's a wonderful reminder of staying in my own lane, staying focused on my own stuff, staying present in the moment. And as I do that, I am more easily able to know what I feel in a given moment because I am staying focused on staying in my own lane. And when someone else is doing something that I don't like, well, now I'm focused on them.
True.
And so I've left me to focus on their stuff, and I can't control any of their stuff.
Nope.
So it's really busy. It's really better for me to just stay in my own lane, mind my own business, and know that, like you, Walt, what you do is your business. And so if I think, well, Walt ought to do blah, 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 I guarantee you my inner being's going to jump in and go, none of your business.
None of your business.
None of your business. I'm like, okay, it's none of my business.
That's funny, but I understand what you mean, and it's also and it's a great point, by the way, and it's something that I think anybody who interacts in society in any way probably needs to spend a little time at least paying attention to. Some of us more than others. I know that I've had to pay quite a bit of attention to it. I still haven't completely gotten it down, but I'm a lot better at it than I used to be. And one of the ways that I like to think about it in order to remind myself is to remind myself just because I go about learning stuff or doing stuff or accomplishing stuff my way doesn't mean everybody else does. So it really behooves me to respect their approach. I may think their approach is crazy, but hey, that's not my decision. It's up to them how they're going to approach it. It's their business. And so I try to respect it. I don't always succeed, but I'm getting better at it. And I gotta say, respecting the other person's way of doing it, even if I think they're absolutely bonkers, is a whole lot less stressful. I can tell you that for certain. Sometimes it actually makes me sit back and like chuckle, like, you got to be kidding. But okay, if that's what you want to do.
Yeah. So let's see. What else do we have here?
Oh, let's see. We got the next section.
Filled with good stuff.
Oh, it is. Well, it always is. But the next section is entitled, Can I Erase Any Disadvantageous Past Thoughts? Can I erase any disadvantageous past thoughts? Okay. First of all, it's a mouthful. Second of all, let's see what they have to say. Jerry says, is there any way a person could erase the slate of all past experiences, thoughts, and beliefs that aren't of any advantage to our joyous creating in this moment?
Abraham says, you cannot look at the unwanted experience and announce that you will no longer think about it. Because even in the moment that you are thinking about that, because even in that moment, you are thinking about that.
Right.
But you can think about something else, and in giving your attention to something else, that unwanted subject from your past will lose power. And in time, you will no longer think about it at all. Rather than trying so hard to erase the past, focus on the present. Give thought to what you now want.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Walt, I got to tell you, that one is a bugaboo for me.
Oh, why is that?
Not that I disagree with it, but, you know, it's kind of like when you're so focused on what you don't want because you think you're focused on what you want, but what you're really focusing on, I don't want this, I don't want this, I don't want this.
Yeah.
Because what you really think you're focusing on is, I want this other thing, but what you really keep focusing on, I don't want this, I don't want this. When you've done that so long, it is not an easy thing to just let it go.
Sure.
So, you know, I've talked about this before, that like I grew up overweight, have always been overweight, have never really known, you know, what I would call the right size body for me. And in that, because I have been inundated and I have thoughts for so long about, I don't want to be overweight anymore. I don't want to be fat. I don't want to buy clothes in big sizes. And all these different things of what I don't want. In a sense, I was constantly internalizing. The reason I'm saying I don't want this is because I know what I really want is to be thin and to buy clothes that like fit on me in a way that's easeful and in a way that feels good. And, you know, I want to be able to have all sorts of more physical activity that's comfortable to me. But it is amazing to me how, even though I always knew that's what I wanted, those were rarely the words that I spoke.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Oh,
you
yeah.
know, I mean, so if I try on something in the closet and I go, ooh, I don't like how this fits, it's fitting too tight. Well, of course, in that moment, what I'm preferring is to put on something that feels looser, it feels more comfortable.
Of course, yeah.
But I don't say to myself, gosh, what in my closet is going to feel really good on me? Instead, I think something like, so what in my closet won't be tight? But isn't that like, wow, I've spent years doing that. Now, over the last, I'd say maybe 3 years, I have been very conscious. Whenever I grab a hold of a thought, when I become aware of a thought, I become very conscious about, oh, is that really how I want to internalize that? And so when I would catch myself fitting myself into some clothes that feel too tight and then going, what do I not have that's tight? Everything feels tight. Well, of course, when everything feels tight, every piece of clothing I try on is going to continue to feel tight.
Sure.
But when I'd capture that thought process, when I capture that thinking, I'd say, let's shift that. So what in my closet will make me feel really good? What in my closet will make me feel feminine or sexy or, you know, happy today? What in my closet, you know, will just say, yes, wear me because I will make you feel good. And even to be able to say those last couple sentences, that has been a practice that I've had to teach myself. Because my default thinking for decades had really been articulating and speaking what I did not want, even though my brain was focused on, I really want the opposite. But out of habit, I kept saying what I did not want.
Yeah.
And so it's not like something that you just overnight go, oh, poof, I'm never going to say those words again. I'm going to always say the right stuff that broadcasts exactly what I want to come into my world. It really does take practice.
Louise and I developed something that we use that it's our way to kind of empower each other to help us notice when we're doing something like that and to change it to something we prefer to say. The phrase that we use is, "That's great, now turn that around." And the cue is obviously, I just said, I really don't like it when it's raining. Okay, that's great, now turn that around. Oh, I like it when it's sunny. And that's the way we remind ourselves. Oh, you just tripped over the little thing about saying it the opposite of what you really mean. Say what you really mean. Turn it around. And it's a great thing to do with a spouse or with a close friend, where you kind of make the agreement. You don't just do it with anybody without telling them, but obviously. But when you have somebody who agrees with you and understands with you how important the law of attraction is, and you both have decided, okay, we're going to kind of help each other and empower each other, the turn it around trick is really helpful, because if you keep urging each other to turn it around, you really learn. You learn it pretty quick.
Well, Jerry's talking here about, is there any way that you can eradicate past thoughts that don't serve you?
Mm-hmm.
And, Abraham, they speak their language, put it that way. They don't always speak human language. But what I've come to recognize is, and they say this, every thought that's ever been thought still exists. And so if we really want, if I'm in a positive space, I could reactivate an old energy or an old thought if I wanted to. But if I'm already practicing a new thing, well, of course, why would I want to?
Right.
But that's an area where, and I don't say this because I want to put fear in anybody's mind, but this is where I am very mindful that if I'm in a conversation with somebody and they start going down a story path that I know is part of my past, and I don't want it, I feel the need to either really guard what I'm allowing in, or change the subject quickly, or exit the conversation altogether, because I realize that I could reactivate some old stuff. And it doesn't mean that it's going to stick with me forever, but I might reactivate it for a couple days and start experiencing the old stuff, and I don't want to. So, especially for me, having been overweight all my life since I was 4, I'd say that's a long time.
Mm-hmm. I would think so. Yeah, I would say.
There are thought processes I really just don't want to engage in anymore, because I know that they don't support me, they don't serve me, they're not taking me in the direction where I want to go. I will sometimes. I kind of like the comparison game. I know Abraham doesn't like it, but I do it very purposefully. When I catch myself doing something new and different, I will stop and say, oh my gosh, in this very situation in the past, I would have fill in the blank. But now, without even thinking, I did this other thing that totally supports who I want to become. It totally supports the thin woman that I know the me really is. And it's oh, this was exciting. And somehow for me, comparing the two is just kind of my natural way of doing it. But I do spend much more time focusing on the new thing that has come to me. Right now, I'll tell you one of my new food things. I'm loving this. I am getting to enjoy food in a way that I believe food was meant to be enjoyed. It tastes good. It feels good going down. I have zero guilt in what I'm eating. And when I step on the scale, it's not going up. As a matter of fact, it continues to go down.
Nice.
So that's telling me that the no guilt diet is totally working for me.
Yeah. Oh, how great is that?
Yeah, I mean, I can have a plate of food, and instead of dissecting it for all of its components in terms of how it's not going to metabolize correctly and how it's going to stimulate this bad thing and blah, blah, that used to be my entire world.
Mm.
And I would say now I look at food and I go, oh, it's so artistic. I love when food is beautiful and then it tastes good. and I savor it as I'm eating it. And it's like, this is such a different way to think about food. And I pay attention to that because this is what I've been wanting for a long time.
Very good.
So this does fit into Jerry saying, can you get rid of old thoughts? Well, for me, I'd say maybe you can't like completely obliterate them, but I haven't over the last 3 years been spending much more time focusing on the thoughts I do want to think and milking them for everything I possibly can, that they're becoming more prominent, more natural, more autopilot, and they feel so much better.
And I will actually advance the argument that does replace the old thoughts. Because it's like with a habit. If you want to change a habit, you don't just quit the habit. That never works. You have to replace it with a new, better habit. And when you do that, whenever you have like the craving to do the old habit and you deliberately stop yourself and decide to do the new habit instead and really get into it so it feels good, you end up erasing the old one by overwriting it, kind of like you overwrite space on a disc, or with the old reel-to-reel tapes. You would overwrite what was recorded on the tape before. It's the same kind of process. And you do that often enough, you will erase it over time. Is it going to be immediate? Maybe not immediate, but who cares? You're making progress. As long as you're making progress, it'll eventually go away.
Well, and I'll tell you something that just now occurred to me as I was talking about, I think I had maybe 2 or 3 times I said something about having always been overweight or been overweight since 4 or whatever. That when I said those things in the past, I would have felt a lot of shame. I would have felt uncomfortable. I would have felt, oh my gosh, I don't want to like express this to like all the people who listen to our show. But I have new awareness right now as we're talking that not only was the shame gone, there was almost a feeling of peace.
Oh, very good.
Like I can accept what is without fighting against it, without rebelling against it, without wishing that it wasn't there. It's like, so what if I've been overweight all my life? The fun thing for me is I'm turning it around.
Yeah.
And the adventure to turning it around not only is very satisfying to me and quite exciting, but I absolutely know beyond a shadow of a doubt that I will be an advocate for teaching others like myself to shift out of that thinking process. Because I've always known this, even though I saw zero evidence, that I would teach other women, men too, but mostly women, to love their bodies and allow themselves to change their thought process so they can have a body that they feel good in, that is the body that they've always desired, and that they can focus on the enjoyment of the new body instead of beating themselves up with shame over the body that they wish they didn't have.
Oh, no. By the way, there's also a real plus benefit that goes along with it, and that is the food ends up tasting better.
Oh, my gosh, yes.
I mean, that's the amazing part.
I told you that when my friend was about to go through a gastric bypass, and she said, hey, why don't you do it too? Almost like it's kind of like, hey, let's go to the same movie together.
Right.
You know, I remember thinking, well, what I know about going through gastric bypass is that they tie off your stomach so that the pouch of your stomach is so small that you can only eat small amounts of food, and you'd have to take supplements for the rest of your life because your body's not going to get all the nutrients that it needs. And I just, this might be a stupid and funny thing, but I remember thinking, oh my God, I would never be able to eat a plate of nachos ever again.
Mm.
And I didn't think I could go there. Now, what's so funny, I haven't eaten nachos in I don't even know how many years, probably 5 or 6 years. That is not something that I even desire. But at that time, that was the thing that kept me like, what? I can't go out for Mexican food and have a plate of nachos? Because I've watched my friends who've had gastric bypass, and they put food on their plate and they nibble because they've learned over time if they eat too much, they get sick.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of had this knowing, even years ago, I wanted to be able to so appreciate the flavor of food. Because even though I was massively eating food and I was addicted to food and I was binging on food, I wasn't enjoying it. And I wasn't enjoying the flavor because it wasn't about the flavor then. But now I'm getting to enjoy the flavor of food for really the first time, and it's good. And I don't just go out for fast food anymore. I treat myself to places that have real chefs that make real food.
Yeah,
and
the best way to go.
They know how to make it really well.
Oh, yeah, they're good at it. They're very good at it. And the other thing, too, about gastric bypass is there's no guarantee it's going to actually accomplish the goal that you want it to accomplish. In fact, the track record isn't all that good. And I could even point very close to home. My sister-in-law, my wife's sister, her husband got a gastric bypass. He had a big problem with weight. And after he got it, it didn't really do anything because he kept gorging. He kept eating with a bad feeling. He just felt like he was constantly being defeated. And he died a year and a half ago. So, just because they tout this thing as if it were some sort of a miracle maker doesn't mean that that's the way it always works out. And I think it really points to the fact that what you're on is really the better track anyway, because he wasn't feeling good about it.
And I do believe that you can treat a symptom, which being overweight is a symptom. You can treat a symptom with a strategy from the medical community, and it can have great benefit, but it won't have long-term benefit if you don't adjust the thinking process.
Yes.
Because that's what, law of attraction makes so very clear. What we think is, and what we're feeling on what we think is what we get more of.
Mm-hmm.
And so the one friend of mine that I'm thinking about, she did the gastric bypass. She lost a lot of weight. And then when she hit the lower weight, shortly thereafter, she started gaining weight back. And I remember her husband talking about how she was still, eating candy bars and, things that, quote, you're not supposed to be eating when you've done gastric bypass.
Right.
But it's basically saying that the old behaviors had not changed.
Right.
She changed them temporarily when if she didn't, her body would absolutely scream and yell and cause her to be throwing up and really violently ill. But when her body kind of adjusted, she started taking on candy again. Mm-hmm. And now I'm not saying anything good, bad, or otherwise about candy, but that for her was an old behavior before the gastric bypass. And so what was fascinating is eventually she started doing some changing in how she was thinking. And I see pictures of her now, and it's she's beautiful.
Oh, nice.
She's lost a lot of the weight. And I know it has a lot to do with the fact that she's changed what she's thinking about.
Sure.
Which is kind of something not that at all that I'm trying to play the know-it-all game, but that was something I internally knew for myself, that when I can take better control over my thoughts in this area that I call body image, weight, food, dieting, etc., I knew that I was going to be able to have the results that I desired, even though I didn't know how at the time, even though I didn't know how to change my thoughts. I certainly didn't know law of attraction. I didn't know many of the other things that I now know. But it's been a journey that I have to say that many years ago, I was so resentful of being in an overweight body. I resented so many people, the media. I resented my mother. I resented anybody who, was thin. I had a hard time with it because I couldn't accept that what my body looked like was okay, because it wasn't for me. And so when I see and know who I am today, I'm still in an overweight body, but I don't see myself in the mirror with the loathing that I used to see myself in the mirror. Now I just see myself as, I have excess weight on my body. Okay. But the feeling that's attached to it is so diametrically different because it's not the loathing energy. And see, this goes to Jerry's point about, can you get rid of the past thoughts? I have replaced, that's maybe one word, but I would say I have found better ways to look at the things that I used to look at with a loathing.
Mm-hmm.
I see myself, in other words, I see today something that has always been there, But because I loathed myself, I couldn't see it. And I have one dear friend, would remind me of this. I went to Russia when I was a costume designer with a group of people, like 150 people. And my girlfriend went with us. And, it's a transcontinental flight. It's a very long flight. And so, like, in the middle of the night, most people are now actually asleep. But I had always been a night owl, and so I couldn't fall asleep. And so I got up to just kind of walk around, and I was standing in this one place. It was one of those giant jets where there's like 5 seats in the middle and 3 seats on each side.
Right.
And
747 or equivalent.
Yeah, kind of like where there's an emergency door. Mm-hmm. There was a really big place to stand where I wasn't like, standing on top of people. And little by little, other people who were my friends that couldn't fall asleep either started coming and joining us. And it was me and my girlfriend, and probably the other 6 to 8 people were all male. And my girlfriend reminds me of this quite often, and I think it's funny, because I would say, well, men were not attracted to me because I was overweight. And she'd say, Wendy, you had these men eating out of the palm of your hand. What are you talking about? She said, you were like the center of attention. I was like in the background watching like a witness. And she said, you had like these 6 or 8 men all clamoring around you, talking to you like they were doing everything they could to vie for your attention, in competition with the other ones. And I'm like, you're crazy. Every time she'd say it to me, I just thought there's something wacky in your thought process and how you assess things. But what's really funny, Walt, is today, because what I see myself as and who I see myself as has changed so much, I can look back at that and went, oh my God, she's absolutely right.
Sure.
They were vying for my attention.
Yeah.
They did really like me. And whether they liked me romantically or not, I'm not even going there. But it's like, I really was the center of attention. And I really got them to really want to connect with me.
Right.
And that was not something I could ever allow myself to own or experience or appreciate when it was happening, because all I knew in my own beingness was, why would any man be interested in me? Because I'm disgusting, because I loathe myself. So of course they're going to loathe me too. And today I look at it so very differently.
You turn it around.
And I have to say, from this bizarre perspective, I'm really grateful for being in this body, because I've learned so much about me. I've learned how to love me despite my body. And I don't mean that in an ugly way where I'm disrespecting my body, but some women are just naturally beautiful, and all they hear all their lives are, oh my gosh, you're so beautiful. And they're wondering, does a man really want her for her, or is it just for the beautiful Barbie doll look that she possesses?
Yeah.
So when I have somebody who cares about me and loves me and is attracted to me, I go, well, it's not about my body. Yay, they really love me.
It's a good way to look at it. Yeah.
And now I'm shifting again, and I'm like, you know what? I want somebody to be attracted to me for my physical beauty, because I want to radiate such internal physical beauty that's what they'll respond to.
Sure.
And the truth is, it'll really never have to do with my physical body. It's always had to do with the inner game, the inner thoughts, the inner belief. So,
and curiously enough, the more that you do that, of course, your body will match it, because the law of attraction will insist upon it. So the more that you buy into this idea, and you're buying into it beautifully, the more your body will match it. It's just the way it works.
Mm-hmm. So, here we are talking on the topic of, can you eradicate the old beliefs? And I don't know if I can ever say I can eradicate them, but I can say I sure as heck don't focus on the old ones anymore. And that's really what Abraham says in this last paragraph, which is, give thoughts to what you now want.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I am. And it didn't happen overnight. And not that I'm trying to tell anybody you can't do anything quickly, but I know that many people who learn how to use law of attraction or are coming into it and want to know how to use it more deliberately feel really frustrated or discouraged when they don't get immediate results. And, I want to say, just keep going. Just keep going. If you never give up, you will eventually get to where you want to go.
That's right.
Just don't quit.
Yep.
And don't throw in the towel and go, yeah, this stuff doesn't work. Because I could have thrown in the towel years ago. But you know what? I really wanted what I wanted. And I really sensed that the law of attraction was going to provide for me the avenue to really get the things that really mattered to me. And so far, so good.
It's like the old Vince Lombardi line, quitters never win and winners never quit.
There you go.
There it is,
well,
right there.
I like to say, if you never quit, success is inevitable. That's a quotable from me. I created that one.
That's a good one.
Because I found myself saying it all the time to clients. If you don't quit, success is inevitable. Just get in there.
Yep.
Certainly found it to be true for me. So my success in every area of my life is inevitable, and I know it is because I will not quit. Quitting is not an option.
The next section here is something that will probably take us the rest of the show. Well, it might not, but it could. Let's just say it has the potential to do that. And it's on a really tough subject, but I'm curious to see how well we can turn it into something positive. Because we're very good at that. So what do you say? Let's give it a shot. It says, well, first of all, the subhead is entitled, How Could One Reverse a Downward Spiral? And Jerry asks, if you were to find yourself in a downward spiral where all the things that were important to you seem to be falling away or depreciating, how could you stop the negative downward motion and turn it in a positive upward direction?
Abraham says, it is an excellent question. That downward spiral is the law of attraction at work. In other words, it started with a little negative thought, then more thoughts were drawn unto it, more people were drawn unto it, and more conversation was drawn unto it until it became a very powerful, as you say, downward spiral. It takes a very strong being to take your thought from what is not wanted when it is that intense. In other words, when your toe is really throbbing, it's difficult to put your thought upon a healthy foot. In extremely negative situations, we would suggest distraction rather than trying to change the thought. In other words, go to sleep or go to a movie, listen to music, pet your cat, do something that will change your thought. Even when you are in what you are calling a downward spiral, some things in your life are better than others. As you focus on the best of what you have, even if it is a small part of what is happening, the law of attraction will now bring you more of that. You can replace a fast-moving downward spiral with a fast-moving upward spiral just by directing your thoughts to more and more things that you do want.
And it's true. It definitely is true. Now, I do have to admit, and this is where perhaps I can get a little bit negative, so I'll try to keep this as brief as possible because I don't want to go on that downward spiral. But I do know that for people who are in, say, very depressed situations, they've been suffering from depression for a long time, that maybe they've been suffering from some kind of abuse, or maybe they're just angry about a whole bunch of things and they can't ever seem to get out of their cycle of anger. There are a variety of ways this can play out. It can play out with substance abuse. It can play out with all kinds of stuff. But whatever it is, when you've been in that place for a long, long time, you've got so much momentum built up. I've found just by talking to people like that about this subject, it can be really, really difficult for them to even accept the idea that changing their thought is going to make a difference. And I imagine you've run into that too as a coach, because you're going to run into people like that when you coach, and it's going to pop up. What's your best strategy for helping somebody who's just in such a bad place? They just have a hard time shifting their thought.
Then that's exactly what Abraham is saying here. If you're having a hard time shifting your thought, then distraction is your best option. So find something that's not depressing. Find a television show that makes you laugh, or a movie that makes you laugh, or, go into an environment where people are talking about things that are uplifting, or listen to our podcast, or go on the internet and just find anything you can with the intention of distracting and feeling better. Now, if you go search in the web, for like your latest ailment, well, that's not distracting. That's just taking you back into your yuck.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say, like, I remember this might have been 6-8 months ago. I can't remember how it happened, but something happened where I hurt my knee, and it was so excruciatingly painful that I couldn't even go down the stairs. And my bedroom's on the second floor, so I'm like, my kitchen's downstairs, don't even know how I'm going to eat. Fortunately, I had a friend come and help me, and so she'd go down and get food for me and whatnot. But it was so excruciating. And like in the middle of the night, I didn't know what else to do except to feel pain. And non-motion caused it to hurt. Motion caused it to hurt. I mean, I felt like I was in this lose-lose situation.
Right.
And I just kept going inside going, what can I do? What can I do? And, it was not easy. But, the first thing I did was, how can I distract? So I put on the TV, and I tried to find television shows that I could get really engrossed in. But you know what? Sometimes late at night, there is nothing engrossing because there are a lot of paid commercials.
Oh, there are,
so
yes.
I was having a hard time finding television to be a distraction that really took me out of just focusing on the pain in my knee. And so then I heard my inner being say, breathe. So I started taking really deep breaths. And that actually started to shift the pain a little bit.
Sure.
And I don't know if it actually shifted the pain or my attention on the pain. Don't know, don't care. Just noticed that it didn't feel as excruciating. And then I was able to kind of go back to television and find some shows that like were a little bit distracting, where I got into like the scene for maybe 30 seconds. It got my attention. Now that is like, I'm talking about physical pain.
Right.
So you were talking about emotional pain, which I don't know, sometimes I think is worse. Because I knew for the physical pain, my knee would not feel this bad for the rest of my life. I knew my body has the wisdom to help it heal, and it did within a couple days.
Right. So the end is near. You won't have to put up with it for a long time.
Right. But people who are in a downward emotional spiral, sometimes, I know I've said this before, that my mom and I used to think, oh my God, can our dad get any lower? Or my dad, her husband, because we just saw how he felt about things was just so bad. And she's like, oh, he must have reached bottom. And I'd laughed and I went, I don't know. I think he can go lower. And he did, because we thought if we were in his condition, we didn't think we could go any lower. We would do something to shift it. But nope, he'd go lower. He'd go lower. So when it comes to emotional stuff, I'd say, like, when I think about my dad, he wasn't open to the idea that his circumstances or how he thought about his circumstances could change. He was such a believer in what is. He had what Abraham calls what is itis. And he just refused to be budged out of his what is itis. Now, if that's the case, then that's where today I'd say it's none of my business. If he chooses to live in what is itis, that is his choice. However, I think you're talking about somebody who wants to shift out of the downward spiral of being in depression.
Well, it's certainly a key point, because if you don't want it, nothing anybody can do is going to help you. You have to want it.
And or to even have a willingness to believe that it's possible to shift out of it.
Yeah.
And at that point, if you can find any kind of evidence of people who have moved from depression to feeling better, those are the stories you want to read. That's the kind of information you want to put in your head to attempt to build a sense of hopefulness, that this is not the end. It doesn't have to get worse. There is a way out of it. And hope, my goodness, hope has a lot to do with our recovery. If we can't hope that there's something better, I feel like we're kind of doomed to just repeat the the unpleasantness or to stay in it. But if somebody really wants to change, whether they're a rageaholic, an alcoholic, a depressionaholic, a foodaholic, if you're in one of those states where you feel like it feels like there's just no win, find a way. Ask your inner being, please show me some evidence that people do get out of this, that there is a way out. Because, I know a lot of people who never exit a state like that. But the ones that never exit it that I'm aware of, that I have personally known, it's because they didn't believe it was possible. And I say, you know what, you can believe it's not possible, but what do you have to lose to be willing to just put a little chink in the armor and say, I'm willing to consider that there's a different possibility?
Yeah.
Because if you decided that you can't get better, well, you've kind of put your own nail in the coffin.
It's true, yeah. I'm thinking about a gentleman I knew very briefly who was very depressed, who actually had... I worked with him a bit. I tried to help him understand how the whole thing works, how important it is to get into the good feeling place, and so forth. And he kind of sort of bought into it, but he was always extremely resistant to any of the things that I would suggest doing in terms of, shifting it around, trying to find the better feeling energies and so forth. And all of a sudden, he announced to me one day that he and a buddy were going to, I think it was Puerto Rico, one of the Caribbean islands. And they were going to go there for like a week vacation. And it was just a getaway to feel good. And I thought, wow, that's great. That's wonderful. And I even encouraged him, while you're out there, while you're doing it, and you had a whole bunch of things you're going to do, really, rev it up. When you're finding something that you enjoy doing, really get excited about it and have fun with it and so forth. And he promised he would. A week later, he comes back from his vacation, and he tells me about what happened. And he had a bunch of things that they did that were really fun. And I asked him, did you rev it up? And he said, well, he didn't deny it. He didn't say, no, I didn't. He just explained how it didn't work out. And I said, yeah, but did you rev it up? Did you get excited about stuff? Was it fun? Oh, yeah, it was kind of fun. I mean, he was doing things like riding motorcycles around on dirt roads, and his buddy was having a great time, and they were just having all this. Oh, it was okay. He couldn't get himself to get excited about something really good that was going on in, like, the best possible scenario it could be in. That told me he really was not willing to make the shift. His mind, he was so determined to stay on the bad stuff that even when presented with a wonderful situation, he wasn't going to go there.
And, I think a lot of people are unaware that, like in the scenario you just described, it actually is a choice.
Yeah, it is.
It is a choice to internalize or represent to yourself what an experience means. You can either represent it in a way of like, yeah, at least while I was there, I was having a good time.
Mm-hmm.
Versus when he expressed it to you, it sounded like it was boring.
He almost treated it that way, yeah.
And you know what? It is even possible. He could have had the time of his life, but he could have a habitual internalization process where then when he fed it back to himself, or when he was describing it to other people, he could have gone right back into the depression type responses. Even if he would have had the time of his life, it's still possible to do that.
Yeah, oh, very likely. Yeah, I suspect that was going on. Yeah, which is sad. But
I think the more we're willing to understand why we do what we do, why we think the way we do, how we got into situations, the more we're willing to pick it apart and be curious, really, the more potential we have for finding something that's really good. But if we're not curious and we have what is itis, then you get stuck with whatever is.
Well, I'm willing to come back tomorrow.
I don't want to live a life of default.
No, I don't either. But I am willing to come back tomorrow and get really excited about doing that. What do you say to that?
I say let's do it again.
All right. And we hope you join us as well here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye now.